So tell us about the scar of the planned pregnancy.
The planned pregnancy. Um, then I would have to tell you how I met this magical man.
Okay.
So after my leg was broken, I was at a retirement party for one of the ministers at my church, and we were at the NCO club. And I looked
Oh,
over.
you didn't tell no one at the church that he broke your leg?
Oh no! Only the minister who was retiring knew, and he was the one that beat him up in the dressing or in the waiting room, but
Oh, wow.
nobody else knew. And that's because this minister was a good friend of ours. Of course, he didn't like him either because he he thought I was sleeping with him. So he didn't like him either, but he was highly respected minister.
Okay.
And so
All
he
right.
was actually the one that helped him do his trial sermon, the first one. So when I was at the retirement party for the minister of our church, I looked over and I seen this guy sitting there and I said, he looked like Shamar Moore. And my friends were sitting there from the church. I said, oh, I said, that guy over there. And I said, oh, he do. Maybe we should tell him. I said, no, that was girl talk. I'll tell him. They said, no, we'll tell him. No, I'll tell him. So I hopped over there and I'm over his shoulder. And they said, tell him. I said, okay. I said, excuse me, sir. And he looked up at me. I said, don't play that domino, play that domino. He looked like, what the heck is wrong with you? And I was like, so I hopped back over to the table. They said, you told him? I said, yeah, I told him. And all of a sudden he's standing next to me. He says, hi. I said, hi. He said, would you like a drink? I said, oh, I don't drink. He said, you want to dance? And I pointed to my leg. I had a cast up to my hip. And he said, what low life did that to you? I said, no, I fell. He said, you didn't fall. He said, you're a woman of God. You didn't fall, but you tell him if he touches you again, I'll break his neck. I said, sir, you don't even know me. I fell and I have 3 kids. And he says, I don't need to know you. You just need to know that I'll protect you. I'm new here in town. I haven't been around for 2 weeks and I don't know anybody. I said, well, I have the best salon in town and here's my card. He said, thank you. And so that guy came by my beauty shop the next day and he said, I'm coming to take you to lunch. I said, sir, I don't date and I don't date strangers. And he said, I'm not a stranger. You gave me your card. And that's because if you needed a haircut, he says, no, I came to take you to lunch. I said, you're a stranger and I don't date strangers. I don't date anybody. And the girls in the shop going, Carolyn, you should go. He's fine. He looks like Shamar Moore. I said, shut up. He's a stranger. And they said, Carolyn, go. I said, no. And he says, they said they'll cover you for lunch. I said, sir, I don't know you and I don't talk to strangers and I'm not going to go with you. And I have people's hair to do. And he says, that's okay. I'm a real man. I'll wait. I said, it could be a long wait. He waited, sitting there looking at magazines for about an hour. And they said, Carol, we got you. Go to lunch. I said, okay. You drive your car, drive my car. We're going right across the street. And we went and we sat and we talked for hours. I lost track of time. That this guy knew all of my music of the 60s and 70s, such a wonderful guy and handsome. And he dated me every day of the week for like 2 months straight. Gentleman, opening car doors, never touched me, hold my hand, kiss my forehead. Just a wonderful gentleman, unreal. But my ex-husband at the same time was like, threatening me all the time. And so this wonderful guy really is standing guard protecting me. And so one day, the planned pregnancy, I had been trying to divorce my ex-husband so many times. And I finally found somebody that showed me a different life, a gentleman. I never experienced that before. Car doors, paying for meals, not touching you, not even talking about touching you, not even having that type of subject, just a gentleman. Never before have I ever met anybody just to pay for your meals and having good conversation, being a friend. And I said, this is the one. And if I get pregnant, maybe my ex will let me out because I knew he couldn't make any kids and I wasn't sleeping with him. He was living with some rich white woman. And yeah, occasionally he would come by and he would rape me, when I had the cast and broken leg. But I needed to get pregnant.
Okay. So you're in a situation with your ex that won't let go.
Right.
And he used to come by and rape you?
Yeah, when he broke my leg and I had a restraining order, I'd be in a sling and he would come like 1 o'clock in the morning and just come in the room and just take advantage of me. And I'm going, I'm not doing this. And I remember calling the minister and I said, he's here again. I can't keep doing this. I don't want this. And he says, let me talk to him. He says, stay away. He said, why? Because you sleeping with her? She doesn't want you. Just stay away from her. And then it would just get so bad. And it was good when I met this hero because he was protecting me to keep this man from coming to the house. And it just didn't make sense because he had some rich white woman that he was living with in the hills. And I'm like, why are you doing this? He would come by like once a week and this wonderful hero, this gentleman who said he'd protect me, he was protecting me. And when I would share with him about what was happening to me, being raped by my at that time husband, my ex-husband now, it kept him away. My ex-husband was scared of this wonderful, heroic man. And he was so scared of him that I remember one day he says, you know who you're dating? I said, what about him? Do you know who he is and what he does? He's a soldier. Nah, he ain't just no soldier. I know who he is. And I remember I went by his barracks. I'm knocking on the door and he wasn't listening to me. He couldn't hear because the music was so loud. And I opened the door and I said, ooh, who are you? I said, Carolyn, what are you doing here? He said, I should be careful of you because you're around the kids and you're dangerous. He said, Carolyn, I would never hurt you. Yeah, but maybe you are dangerous. All this stuff in your room. Who are you? He said, you're not supposed to be here, Carolyn. And don't nobody know who I am. He said, nobody knows who I am, but he better stay away from you. I was like, oh,
Wow.
yeah. And it kept him away. It kept him away. He was scared of my husband I am with now.
So you end up getting pregnant.
Yeah. So what happened was, when one of our dates and stuff, I know me, I know my cycles and when I can get pregnant and when I can't. And I knew my ex-husband wasn't giving me a divorce. And every time I filed, he would do something. And so I said, maybe he'll give me a divorce this time. And in Colorado, you can't get a divorce. They make you go through mediation for a year. And so I said, this is the time that I can get pregnant. And granted, this hero man I was dating, he wasn't touching me. He wasn't doing nothing. He wouldn't kiss you. He wouldn't hold your hand. He'd just hold your hand and kiss your forehead. And so we were at Prospect Lake one day and I kissed him. He said, why'd you do that? Do you kiss back? I said, yeah, I do. So I kissed him again. He said, Carolyn, don't do that. And I knew I could get pregnant. So I was the aggressor and I took advantage of him to get pregnant purposely. And I did. And when I did that, he quit talking to me. I like would call him. He wouldn't call back. I put a note under his door. He wasn't responding. I talked to his roommate. He's not responding. And I said, gosh, he must really hate me. And then about 3 weeks later, he came to the house with, gifts for me and the kids. And he looked at me and he got on his knees and pulled out a ring and said, marry me. I said, huh? He said, Carolyn, marry me. He said, I've always wanted a woman of God. And what I did to you, I apologize. That can never happen again. I said, but I was the aggressor. So I had to cooperate. And he said, never again. I said, what do you mean? He said, marry me. I said, he's never going to give me a divorce. He said, I'm a real man. I'll wait.
Wow.
Did you ever find out what he does?
Not until after he retired from the military and we had to go through the transition of all the benefits and who he was. And I looked at that paperwork and said, oh my goodness. He said, what? You didn't tell me about this. He said, Carol, just do my paperwork. I said, now I know when we went to the prison to go visit my brother, why they wouldn't let you in. My brother said, because that you're bad. He said, Carol, I'm not bad. They said, you're such a bad brother that you can just break anybody out of prison.
What did he do?
My husband is such a gallant, strong man that he has to register his hands as a lethal weapon.
Wow.
And He's a professional with the military. He's a sniper.
Mm.
He's a lethal weapon.
Okay.
So my husband I'm with never knew that I was pregnant. My ex-husband found out that I was pregnant, which I wanted him to know, hoping that he would let me have a divorce, and it backfired on me. He found out and he said, "You will never talk to him again. And if you do, I'll make sure he loses his career in the military." And so the whole pregnancy, when he found out from that 2 months through the whole pregnancy, he locked me in a house to where you can't get out unless you have a key to get in and a key to get out.
Wow.
And so I just stayed in the house. I couldn't go anywhere or do anything. I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody. And one time, my husband I'm with now called me and I said, "Oh my gosh, you're calling me. Why are you calling me?" He said, "Carol, you called me." "No, I didn't call you. You can never call me again." And I hung up. And my ex-husband walks in the door like 5 minutes later and says, "Who are you talking to?" So I wasn't talking to anybody. "You were. And I told you what would happen to you, what would happen to him. He will never have this baby. You will never be with him. He will never have a career. You forgot what I told you. He will lose his career. 10 years in the military, he'll lose it all because of you. So make up your choice what you're going to do about that." So I never talked to him after that. And I went through the whole pregnancy and um, I found out that in Atlanta you can get you get a divorce in 6 months. So all that time being locked in the house, and I remember going into having ready to deliver, and I called him and I said, "I need to go to the hospital." He says, "Well, I guess you're gonna lose that baby, aren't you, B? Because I'm not coming to let you out." And so I had to break windows and to pry myself to get out of the house and help the girls get out. And we had to walk in snow that was up to our hips just to make it to a payphone. Back then we had payphones and called an ambulance to get me to a hospital. And I delivered the baby. And when I delivered the baby, I called my lawyer to the hospital and I said, "I can't go back. Bring me the papers to sign and settle my case." He said, "Carolyn, you have $100,000 million case. This case is big." I said, "I don't care. I don't care if you don't give me but 5,000. I got to get out of here. I can't leave this hospital and go back. Please come to the hospital. Give me the money." So my lawyer did, and he gave me like 60 grand. And I drove straight to Atlanta, bought a car and my 3 girls, and I called my mom and said goodbye to her, and the baby was brand new, 6 weeks. She wasn't even 6 weeks old. She was like maybe 2 weeks old, and drove to Atlanta and lived out in a mini mansion in the Broadlands in Cobb County. And my ex-husband found out where I was at and filed my divorce, and it was almost over. And I'm back there packing because I'm going back for my real man. And my daughter says, "Mom, he stole the baby." I said, "What? Dad stole the baby." I said, "No." So I called the police and I said, "It's not his baby." And he took the baby and I showed them proof, and they came by and they wrote up the report and they called him and said, "If you don't bring her back, we're going to get you for felony kidnapping charges." And the police left and he came back and he honked the horn. He said, "You want the baby, B? Come get her." So I ran outside. He's got the baby holding her out the window. He's in a van. And so I'm walking, as I walk closer, the higher he's holding her out the window. And I'm like, "Give me the baby." He said, "You effing B, that, da, 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 is that, you think he's better than me?" And he's just yelling and screaming, "This baby means that much to you? He'll never get this effing baby." And I'm going, "Okay, God, what do I do?" So I went to go try to run to grab her. He backed out the driveway, speeding it fast. And "You want to be catcher?" And he threw her out the car window.
Your your baby.
He threw the baby out the window, and she might have been not even 3 months old. And when he threw her out the window, she landed on the ground. Um, she wasn't moving. She wasn't crying. And I called the police and they said to meet them at the emergency room with the paramedics. And we got there and the doctors examined her and x-rays and everything. They said, "There's nothing wrong. Nothing's broken. No bleeding." I said, "He threw her." And the police says, "We can do the report, but it's up to you. They said there's nothing wrong with the baby." I said, "Yeah, but he deserves to go to jail." I said, "But if I do a report, I have to stay, don't I?" She said, "Oh yeah, you have to stay for courts and stuff." I said, no, I got a real man.